Good evening. Welcome to the Toronto Debating Society. Today is April 22nd, 2014. My name is Dave. I will be your speaker for this evening. Tonight we have a regular motion. Environmental activists are bad for the economy. Our first speaker is the Prime Minister Adrian, who will speak for 7 minutes. Adrian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The motion before you tonight is that environmental activists are bad for the Canadian economy. By environmental activists, we mean the private citizens who attempt to stop development for alleged environmental concerns, are bad for, impede the growth of, the Canadian economy, the wealth-generating activity concerning Canadians in Canada. So, first I'm just going to have a background thing. In terms of environmental activists, they're always trying to change the environment. They're always trying to prove it. They're always going after business. They don't consider their needs. They don't think think about how responsible that businesses are. Businesses are also the ones that provide the jobs and the money, and they keep our economy going. They promise, green jobs and help the economy, but there's a lot of myths and distortions in that. One phrase I have that helps is that Porter and Van der Linden said, the possibility of regulation might act as a spur to innovation arises because the world does not fit the Panglossian belief that firms always make optimal choices. First, I'm going to speak now on how environmental activists affect the different parts of the economy. My partner, Nicholas, will speak later on the character of environmental activists. My first argument is that Kyoto was not wanted by Canadians, demonstrating that Canadians do not want businesses to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. Kyoto is a law that was created in Japan. It was kind of passed, but it was kind of didn't renew it. There was a lot of debate and issues. With Stephen Harper, he changed to his cabinet minister of environment from one of Rambo's to John Baird, and many activists came out, including David Suzuki, and they were outspoken about it, and there was an election over it, and the Conservatives won it, and Kyoto was defeated. And it shows that people do not always like these laws that the environments are coming after. It shows too that it is a threat, that people recognize that these gas emissions and stuff would be a real threat to the economy. My second argument is that environmentalists affect the oil industry. So you have major issues with Keystone Pipeline and Alberta tar sands. That they are good natural resources. There is a good source of revenue, money, and economic growth that can be made out of these things, that environmentalists go after and attack them. Even though that, we're going to do these things, but we will also be responsible, and we'll be responsible to the environment. The activists still get upset, and they don't like it, and they don't want these things happening, and they advocate against it. Another area that it affects is the car industries. So, emissions are regulated by the federal government. They were regulated in 1988 to control levels in 81. There were even amendments in June 1996 that were designed to match targets. But these cost the car industry a lot of money in the design and production and the cost of it, and it really affects it. Another area that is affected is that environmentalists affect the pulp and paper industry. So environmental activists, are very critical of the industry because of biochemical oxygen demand and total suspended solids. And they put all these things in requirements, and they really hinder the industry, and it affects their production costs and their operating costs and their business and the way they run it. My next point is that environmental activists hurt businesses through the chemical management plan. It was a law passed by the government, and it really, has regulations that impact Canadian companies using chemicals. And some of the research that's come out of it is that it costs businesses to comply with excess of $30 billion a year. And the people that are being hurt the most and affected the most aren't the biggest companies, but the small companies. Because what happens is, when you're a small company, now you have very very little room in your budget for wiggle room, very little money to take on these costs and responsibilities. And it's forcing companies to really feel the pinch and get tight on this, is what happens too. My next point is that sulfur dioxide, that there is emissions through sulfur dioxide through mining that people are very worried about. You know, that there are many different types of mining that are done, that even nickel, copper, lead, zinc, gold, aluminum, they are all being targeted and attacked because, you know, that there is these sulfur dioxide emissions that come out, that it really affects their industry, production again, you know, operating costs, how do you pay people, how do you work these things. You know, there is a lot of controversy that's going on in these industries right now. And so basically what you're seeing is a lot of people who are in these jobs and in these industries, they're being affected. And what you're getting is a lot of people who, like, if rabbis will come up and say, well, you know what, these changes are necessary, but the fact of the matter is that these changes that they have are posing a real threat to these companies. You know, that, you know, if you're an energy company or a mining company, or if you're a pulp and paper company like a Quebecor or some other company, that these changes are really coming about and they're really affecting them, and they're making it really hard to operate the business. And people say that, well, you know, other jobs are going to come out, that the green economy is going to create other jobs, but there's little proof of that. There's little in the numbers of it, that it is actually a real threat to the economy, and that it's a real hindrance, and that these restrictions really are just going to pile up. They're going to become more of a burden, that eventually what you're going to have is you're going to have all these companies that are all really heavily regulated and burdened and strapped down, and it will really affect everything. Please vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And now, please welcome the Leader of the Opposition, speaking for 7 minutes, Adi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister. Good evening, friends. As the Leader of the Opposition, I would like to start off by respectfully disagreeing with the many points that Mr. Prime Minister has made, and then moving on to make some of my own points that will clearly reveal that environmental activists are not bad for the Canadian economy. Moving on to what Mr. Prime Minister just now gave us, a joyride of capitalism. Businesses keep the economy going. That was his first point. Economy is not just made out of businesses or out of the greens. The 4 factors of production is land, labor, capital, and enterprise. There is labor, there is land, the most important resources on which an economy is built. So, when Mr. Prime Minister made this point that it's detrimental to the wealth, it's not just wealth. The economy stands on a lot of factors other than wealth. Next, Mr. Prime Minister also brought out Kyoto Protocol, and there was a large amount of unrest because of Kyoto Protocol. Agreed. And maybe environmentalists might have felt short then to convince the Canadian people and the government to follow the Kyoto Protocol. But since Kyoto Protocol, the CO2 emissions have risen so much in all those countries that do not follow the protocol. There are evidences, and scientists have already published reports over the period of time. Next, Mr. Prime Minister also brought out a most controversial and the current affairs about Keystone XL pipeline. Yes, the Keystone XL pipeline has been painted as a rosy picture about number of jobs that it will generate in Canada and the United States. The amount of revenue that will come out of taxation, that's fine. But the dark side of the project is that about 36% of increase in the greenhouse gases will take place once this pipeline is put down. Not only that, that's equivalent to almost putting 4.6 million cars on the road right overnight. Also, the Keystone XL project is very correctly being under the controversy and has been protested against. Basically, tar sand extraction and oil sand extractions do have a lot of byproducts which are detrimental to the environment. The carbon 2 emissions that have been increased in Alberta area since this project started initially has increased manyfold. In fact, Alberta, if it were to be its own country, it would have the highest per capita CO2 emissions in the world, even beating China. Good thing that it's not a country of its own. Next point that Mr. Prime Minister made was about the car industries. That there were a lot of number of standards, there are a lot of number of checks that have been put at place on the car industry or the automobile industry in order to make it safe for the environment and for the people. This goes without saying, it has to be put at place. Canada has one of the least number of car accidents and deaths because of the fault in the automobile, as against the countries that do not follow these standards. There may be other reasons for car accidents, drunk driving, etc., but not the car standards. Next, Mr. Prime Minister also came with the point that all these environmental activist protests lead to a real threat to the business. What threat to the business? Just that the fat cats can't buy 2 yachts and can buy only 1 yacht? Is that a threat to the business? Canadian economy has been going pretty steady for decades together, in balance, hand in hand with the environment. And finally, the sixth or the last point, Mr. Prime Minister came on saying that there is a very little proof that the environmentalists are shouting. They are making a hue and cry about nothing. No, it's not so. There have been scientific papers in different scientific journals actually showing evidences of deterioration in the environment because of these businesses. We can't just blindside this. We cannot just dismiss this. So, coming on to my main points about environmental activists being good for the Canadian economy, or definitely not bad, is the first point is the environment activists keep a check on this capital-intensive machinery of corporations, and also at times the government that just plays in their hands. Now, coming back to Keystone XL project. Now, the former co-director of Greenpeace International, Zepra Berkman, has already written a book, and she's already written there that 300 million liters of toxic sludge is put out every day in Alberta because of the tar sands extraction project. Just imagine how worse it would get once this pipeline gets done. And who is to say that this pipeline is the end of it? Once they get the taste of it, we'll have a spider web of pipeline all across through Alberta. And we don't know what environment will suffer off. So, besides this, the government has also reduced the funding for all the scientific organizations that actually monitor the environment. This gives you a sense that the government has already played into the hands of the corporates. Now, when these two powerful entities, that the corporations and the government, are one-sided, who will give a voice to the weaker side? Who will give a voice to the general public and to the environment? Environmental activists. These are the ones that come into picture. Second point I would like to make is environmental activists keep the economy and industry on its toes. It pushes for all the new innovations which are much more efficient and better than what we have today. If we were to settle for what we have today, we would never move ahead. The best example would be the Montreal Protocol of 1989, where it was forced that CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, will not be admitted in the industry. Why? Because it was depleting the ozone layer. There was a hue and cry in the industry. The industry forecasted that the whole economy is going to go in shambles because CFC cannot be used. Well, 2 years later, we had better substitutes, and today we have the ozone layer at least up above our head. Third point, environmental activists undertake affirmative action projects. Mr. Prime Minister brought about David Suzuki's name. David Suzuki Foundation has helped restore a clam fishery in the Vancouver Islands. Also, environmentalists have brought out with one impact or effort of Earth Hour, where we last year saved approximately 900 megawatts of hours of electricity in Canada. So please help me defeat this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader of the Opposition. And now, speaking for 5 minutes, please welcome the Government Secretary, Nicholas.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I go into my own arguments, I would like to rebut some of the things our distinguished opponents have made, some points they've made. So the Leader of the Opposition brings up Kyoto, and he brings up XL Pipeline, and he brings up car accident deaths, and these don't really fit into what the topic of the debate is, and that is, are environmental activists bad for the economy? And in all of these situations, he says, well, the environment is doing poorly in these situations. But he didn't mention the fact that the economy, when we missed Kyoto, the economy went straight up. And if we met Kyoto, we would not have been able to do any oil sands development, which was the one thing that kept Canadian economy on a solid, firm basis throughout 2008. We suffered much less than everyone else. So thank you for proving our point. Yes, by missing Kyoto, we did really well for the economy. Thank you very much. Car accident deaths has nothing to do with anything. That was a strange point to bring up. He says that we're here to serve the corporate interests so people can buy more yachts. Well, tell that to the people who make yachts for a living. Tell that to people who live in areas where they benefit from the business of a booming yacht industry. We don't live in a bubble. People's capital moves around. When everybody gets wealthy, when the people at the top get wealthy, everybody gets wealthy because they support all the businesses around them, and it trickles down. You said that environmental activists push for new innovations. I would disagree wholeheartedly. I would say that businesses create new innovations when they're economically viable. Now, the leader, our leader of government, said that businesses will act responsibly. And let me tell you why. Because when businesses get a plan, they come together and they say, is it worth doing this development? And here's how they decide. They say, can we do it cleanly? Can we do it efficiently? And why? Because they have an interest to serve, and that's to not get sued. When they build a pipeline that leaks, they will get sued. When they pollute a local neighborhood, they will get sued. That's why they will always mitigate their own effects so they don't get sued. It's not environmental activists that prevent that. It's businesses themselves because they have an interest in not getting sued. So, to get into my own points, I would like to describe the character of these environmental activists and the specifics of why they hurt the economy. There is a pervasive behavior among environmental activists, and they are very good at saying no. It doesn't matter when the development addresses their concerns, they say no. And when you say, what would you do instead? They come up with terrible, terrible solutions. So there's 3 types. There are NIMBYs, which stand for not in my backyard. And there are bananas, which stands for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And then there are those that, I don't have a funny acronym for them, but they're just the ones that don't know what the heck they're talking about. They go and they argue, and then you ask them exactly why they're opposing something, and they don't have a clue. So NIMBYs, these are the type of people that oppose landfills, but they're perfectly happy to send garbage all the way down to Michigan when we don't have resources here in Ontario to treat our waste management. That's worse for the environment. They don't care, not in my backyard. They want no island airport because they make up some excuse about the extra pollution, even though the pollution standards are the same. They want no gas plants, even though the cost of transporting the energy from further away would make the gas prices go higher and hurt business. They want no highway expansions, even though gridlock costs the GTA $2 billion a year. Bananas, they say, we have nuclear power, but we do not want to dispose of the waste, no matter what. Just let it sit. None of it. We won't have any of it. Well, we have these solutions that could be really well. They'll do really well. They'll be secure for 100,000 years. Don't care. No disposal of nuclear waste. No fracking. Oh well, it'll pollute the groundwater. Well, we can do fracking over here where it's far away from the groundwater. This will create tons of business in Newfoundland and all these places where they desperately need it, especially with the depleted fishing stocks. No fracking at all. We don't care, even if it has no mitigating, no adverse effects. No logging. Doesn't matter about the seasonal employment of those people. And no tar sands. Doesn't matter if we can address every single one of their concerns. They will still come back and say no. And then there are people who don't know anything about the environment, but they still fight against it. No nuclear power. Even when nuclear power is safe and is better for the environment than fossil fuels like coal, they'll say no, no, no. No GMOs. Doesn't matter that GMOs require less land per acreage. You can build denser crops. Doesn't matter that they can be healthier. Doesn't matter any of that. They don't have any of it. No. And nothing but non-renewables. Well, this doesn't make any sense because the economy right now can't support non-renewables. We tried to build them in Ontario, and what a boondoggle. Energy prices are through the roof, driving businesses right out of the province. It was a mistake. It was a mistake to do wind turbines and solar panel power in Ontario, but they won't have any of it because they don't know what they're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, please support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Government Seconder. And now, our final speaker is the Seconder for the Opposition. Please welcome Dean.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we have so much garbage we can't recycle it from the government side. Very quickly, I want to go over some quick points that were made. The trickle-down theory, everybody gets rich when everybody gets rich, this whole thing has been disproven by economists. A tide raises all boats. That's not true. Employers earn 200 times as much, in some cases, as their employees do. That's not a fair tide, ladies and gentlemen. Businesses do not monitor themselves. If they get caught, they try to use the courts to protect themselves and keep it in the courts for years. The government seconder says, well, the bananas say that we want no nuclear power plants, and yet the know-nothings say, well, nuclear power is safe. So I guess the bananas and the NIMBYs or whatever are fighting each other. You've got all these people. These environmentalists are not all this way. They are moderate. They're even on the other side, ladies and gentlemen, for business, but for responsible business. That's what the government's not telling you. They're giving you this crazy person in the wilderness screaming out about how we have to recycle everything and do this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, no, we are suggesting on the opposition that, in fact, environmental activists are good for the Canadian economy. Firstly, let me introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Tom Steyer, who's a hedge fund manager in California. He doesn't like the XL pipeline. He's against it, ladies and gentlemen. He's against it, and he suggests, in fact, in Canada, oil and gas only make up 8% of the Canadian economy. 8%! And the amount of waste and garbage that's being produced that environmentally has to be dealt with by you and me through our taxes, cleanup, or whatever else, bad water, is that worth 8% of our gross domestic product? Healthcare is about the same level, ladies and gentlemen. That's important as well. I will suggest to you that activists have to eat too. If you've got a bunch of activists getting together against some whatever corporation or whatever, well, they're going to buy food, they're going to buy the placards and the pieces of wood and the markers they need to make their signs. That's good for the Canadian economy. Maybe not a large amount, but nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that works. The other issue that Ralph Nader said years ago, corporations internalize profits and externalize costs. And with the environment, that's great because you can't tell what the costs to the environment are, especially when you have a federal government like we do now that doesn't believe in science. We're not sure climate change, we don't believe it. Everybody in the world knows it's real, knows it's happening. The federal government here, well, we're not sure, we got to wait a little longer. No, that's not responsible. Environmental activists, as my partner has said, are the burr on the backsides of government to motivate them to control the corporations and to shame the corporations. An interesting thing about advertising, if you watch Canadian TV, you'll see Cenovus and the other oil companies saying, what a lovely job we're doing, taking the oil out and look at the green forest. Well, it's not that way. There's garbage and they don't show you the tailings ponds. But what's interesting is that the federal government has actually given these ad companies $40 million this year to promote oil buying by foreign countries, Europe, Asia, and the US. from the tar sands area. 40 million of your taxpayer dollars. Now, if you don't say that's a benefit, at least it's going into the economy. The advertisers are getting paid, the TV stations are getting paid, the newspapers are getting paid, the promoters are getting paid. That's an economic benefit. You may not like it, but it's an economic benefit. And clubs like the Sierra Club and Greenpeace, they motivate those companies to spend the money on those commercials to go against the messages that they're bad. They have to tell you they're good. That's also good for the Canadian economy. Again, not maybe the way you think it is, but it is promoting the promotion of the oil sands or not. The other thing is it makes for alternate options for people. Environmentalists cause other ways of doing things to be created. Solar power, wind power is coming up. Yes, it's slow. Yes, we're environmental crazies who believe it's going to be there. Once oil stops, it's done. And it doesn't matter how much you want, you're not going to get it. But the environmentalists will tell you that yes, you need to think about other options, ladies and gentlemen. Thereby, good for the Canadian economy.
Thank you, Mr. Seconder, for the opposition. It's now time for the leaders to summarize their positions. So the first speaker for the opposition will be the leader of the opposition, presenting his summation for 2 minutes. Addy.
Thanks for having me back again. Well, to sum up, I think it's pretty clear that my colleague and myself have already put forward a lot of points which will clearly say that environmental activists are not bad for the Canadian economy. They might have not been effective at times, but they are definitely not bad for the economy. This is an outreach. It's a leap to say something like this. We already have shown you that there is a need in a democracy to have a check. Environmental activists keep a check on this powerful side of corporations and governments that may sway. We already have seen from the government side wealth, and wealth trickle down, which does not work, as my partner has already clearly mentioned it. So it's not only wealth, it's not only the greens that we can worry about. We have to worry about the long term. It's the environmental economists that keep us on our toes. We would like to have more activists who would raise a bell, raise a flag for things that are going wrong in democracy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to sum up saying that environmental activism in Canada is an expression of democracy that keeps the Canadian economy safe from whims and the wishes of the few. Please help us defeat this preposterous motion, because supporting this motion is literally like killing the goose that lays golden eggs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader of the Opposition. Now please welcome again our final speaker, the Prime Minister speaking for 2 minutes, Adrian.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Okay. Well, I first wanted to address some of the points here of the opposition. They are saying that they are not effective at everything and they're not bad for the economy. But the fact of the matter is that they're already saying they're not effective, that they still want to hop on Kyoto, though there was an election on it, though it was not renewed, that it was bad for the economy. They say that there is a cost, they show you the cost and stuff, but they don't tell you the benefits and the outcomes. The long term is not just for the environmentalists and the environment, but also our business and our economy, and making sure that we compete in the global market. So we have to worry about that. 8% of the GDP is the same as about healthcare. Is healthcare not important to us? That's what I want to know. Kyoto, as I said, Kyoto climate change mentioned that too. The oil uses. As I said, it's more of a cost benefit thing. So I'm going to go through this here. Yeah. So essentially, my partner and I, we went through the went into the motion, but I spoke about how the environmentalists affect different parts of the economy. Nicholas talked about the different character of environmental activists. Kyoto was not wanted by Canadians, demonstrating that Canadians do not want businesses to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. Environmentalists affect the oil industry. Environmentalists affect the car industry. Environmentalists affect the pulp and paper industry. Environmental activists hurt businesses through the chemical management plant, and sulfur oxide emissions to mining affect mining companies. And then he talked about the NIMBYs, the bananas, and the people who don't know the environment. And ladies, what's happening here is you have these environmentalists. They always want to change the environment. They're always going up in business. They're always attacking them. They're always trying to change their ways. The businesses are working. They're trying to address many of these things. Please vote in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. That concludes the debate, and now we will hear from the adjudicator. Speaking for 7 minutes, please welcome Gurjo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we had a wonderful debate. I think it was very well presented from both the sides, and a great topic indeed on Earth Hour or Earth Day as well. So I think we had a really good debate in terms of content and rebuttal, and some good arguments presented by both the sides. So if I talk about teamwork was very well presented on few points, and on few points both the teams lacked few points, but they tried to do a good job on overall presenting us a better view of the activists as well as the economy as well as their effect in Canada. Although I think Alberta was the main topic that was in there, because rightly so, because of the oil, tar sands, and the economy based on the oil there, and the environment, supposedly all the environmental effects related with the oil industry. Talking about the arguments, I think Prime Minister started well by talking about the benefits that the business brings to the economy, and how is it good for the society or country overall. And it was very well rebutted as well by the leader of opposition to talk about the ills of the capitalism and the wealth. And the arguments presented by the Prime Minister, I think. They were Kyoto Protocol was a very good thing. I think that good weapon that they had in the arsenal, and they used it pretty well, both Prime Minister and his seconder. But other than that, then Prime Minister started with all the industries, especially with the pipelines and the iron and the revenue generation by the different industry, then the car industry, and I think it was mostly the industry point he was putting forth in the debate. And the one point that I really liked that Prime Minister put forward, and I think nobody rebutted that much, was about the small industry that with various activism, and many times the small industry gets affected, and it is not, and they suffer a lot. And I think that was not rebutted well on both the sides, but that was a good point to put forward, because most of the time the big industries might have the might and the wealth to fight against whatever is being done. So overall, good arguments presented. Then I think the government seconder as well, he presented his points more about the NIMB and banana. Those were refreshing things, and he came up with really intelligent acronyms about that. But what I found was there was, I think, the Prime Minister was more focused on the industry, but his seconder wanted to go after the activisms, that how they're bad for the economy, and mostly what the different things they do. They are against fracking, they are against GMOs, and they are against everything. But the points what I felt missing were the unison and the teamwork that could have been better. And Prime Minister could have done even better job in the summation part as well, that bringing both the points together. And but Prime Minister spent more time in rebutting the government seconder's point for a minute, and then he lost his time to actually represent government side. Uniformly or in unison, that he could present both the ideas. But I think that you lost there, that you just wanted to rebut what Seconder was saying. But overall, I think that from the content standpoint, content was good from both the speakers, Prime Minister as well as the Seconder, and also about the rebuttals. I think rebuttals were done very well by the government Seconder. They were I think the best rebuttals, that he just went after the leader of the opposition and really took his I think the point of innovation, that innovation is mostly done by the big industries rather than the small industries, but you missed a few points about the affirmative action, that they said that big organizations are not self-regulating, and they are not that affirmative. I think you just missed one point, but your rebuttals were spot on and quite refreshing. And from the content standpoint, your content was good, but from the government scandals, I think arguments put forward, I think you just had the NIMB and banana, those are the two main arguments that were put forward, but they were quite refreshing. But overall, I think in the teamwork standpoint, that it looked like there were two parallel debates going on rather than one side presenting a debate. That's what I felt from the government side. From the opposition side, on the other hand, was good in their teamwork. They were in unison. They echoed the points that I think the science research point that they made, and the economic benefit points that they made. It is mostly by the government. It sounds like government is hand in glove with the industry that they propagated. That was I think again reaffirmed by both the speakers. And the innovation point, they said the innovators keep the people on their toes, industry on their toes, and they bring forward the innovation. That was really good point. Those are good points. Also, the CO2 emission point, the rebuttal done by Prime Minister was spot on, that he said Kyoto Protocol might be a loss, but CO2 emission is right there. And all the rebuttals were really well done by the Prime Minister and leader of opposition. He totally rebutted very well and reaffirmed his leader of opposition's points, and very well done, very good teamwork. So overall, I think we had a very good debate, and there many points were raised, and I give that debate to opposition by 65 to 35. And best debater is Adi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adjudicator. Congratulations, opposition, on winning the Adjudicator's Cup. And now we come to the Popular Vote Award. This is where the audience has tabulated our votes. And the popular vote also goes to the opposition with a score of 12-2. So could I see a member of the opposition for the People's Choice Award? Or the members of it? Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So therefore, the motion is defeated. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending tonight's debate, and thank you, debaters, for putting on that great debate. Thank you.